So if you're not already familiar, Rebecca Zeiss is our guest tonight, and she uses historic processes like wet plate collodion to create ethereal images. And in her series, Seeking Solace, she creates anonymous portraits of people holding cherished objects. And it's work from that series that's going to be on view at Halide in June as part of the exhibition contained within. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
I see some familiar faces, and I see Stephanie's here. I can't wait to meet you, Stephanie, coming up soon. I am very honored to be selected to be part of this talk and part of the show with Stephanie and Emma Powell. And Stephanie being a new friend, and Emma, I've been watching her work and have known her for almost 10 years now, I think. I met her in Nebraska. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen. And I decided that I should share that, oh, my messy desktop, less messy than usual. That a lot of times I've decided that my slides are never in order and that I am always going back and forth with them. So I am going to take you all on a journey talking about not only my process, but the conceptual part of my work itself too. And I'm going to just take you back in time to a couple of singular images that were more significant and a couple of projects that I've done that are more significant. So I'm starting out with, and tell me everybody, is this in your view, the one I'm wiggling? No.
Sorry,
Okay.
Rebecca, you broke up a little bit. What did you ask about the
I
image?
asked if that bar was visible.
Oh, no, we don't have a bar.
Okay, awesome. So I'm starting you off with, and hopefully I'm not going to break up. So how about I'll raise your hand like this if I'm breaking up, and I'll slow down. I'm starting you off with a piece that I call Solicitor, and this was a kind of experimental piece that I did back when I was first learning how to use a view camera. It's shot 4x5, and it was probably my very first image that I started thinking about what it says and what it's about. And, rather than just here's a beautifully organized image, or here this is, compositionally correct, or it's lit correctly. But I started thinking about work that had content to go with it. And along the way, I was also co-venturing into what happens if you photograph just like this little glimpse of a moment, that moment that's kind of in between the other moments. So I don't know how many of you remember phone booths, and Eric Kunzman photographs just phone booths a lot right now. So it always makes me smile to go back to this image and look at the phone booth aspect. And this is in a mall where you have like a whole circle of maybe 8 phones that everybody can be talking at. And, a lot of old movies, they have these in too. But what I wanted to put together was, and we still have this today, that we get on our cell phones, all of these phone calls of solicitation. And, a lot of times we don't even answer the phone. And, back in the day when you had a phone in your house, you didn't know who was going to be on the other end, and you'd pick it up and there is a solicitor. And they were always invading your privacy and taking up your time. And really, they couldn't care less about you. So I try to get that little moment of the phone call part of it, but I also tried to convey with this and totally experimental, like that anonymity of who the people are that they call. So I took a phone book and I ripped out the pages and I put all of around the edge of the framing are the phone book pages. And some of them have circles and notes, and then around the very exterior that you can't probably see in this dark edge, but it has punched in numbers. And I was working on conveying meaning with the image, putting it together so it's interesting, and then I drew over it too. So it's experimental in like so many different ways. And I look at this as like that moment in time where I'm just starting to figure it out and go a lot of different directions. This is a chromogenic print. It's about 40 by 40. All right, now how do I make it go to the next slide? That would seem like that should have been the down button. There we go. So I move on to I'm working on these minutes kind of in between, and I put one of my medium format cameras in the back of my car, and I put it on a cable release so that I'm taking the picture right as I'm driving over the top of the bridge, right when the camera only sees the steering wheel and the skyline. And I played around with this in the darkroom, and I put my negatives. I had a bunch, a couple rolls of film, and I put them in the enlarger, and I would expose half of the centerpiece of the paper to the exposure and dodge it out. And then I'd flip it over and put a different negative in and dodge the other side. So I've got these two images on top, and you can kind of see that X area where they overlap. What was interesting to me about this is that, besides the fact that I used my entire box of 16 by 20 Ilford warm tone paper, but the fact that when I show it to people and we talk about what it means to me or what it means to them, that there is more than 7 different associations that a person could get from thinking about this image. And that became really, really interesting to me to think about, what other people get out of an image more than what you mean it to be. And kind of like Death of the Author, where you talk about that you don't control what other people get out of it. So I'm kind of continuing this direction, and I'm going to flip through a couple more faster. This is 2 different medium format negatives, but I will draw your attention to this doorknob. And I revisit this doorknob again. So this doorknob has been mounted on plexiglass before I photographed it, and it's from a mental institution up in Traverse City. And this would be the very beginning of where I'm starting to think about this aura that objects have, and this transmission of this other, if we think about string theory, all these other dimensions that things could be communicating in. And I really felt like, even this curved area, I don't know if you could see my mouse or not, but there's a curved area in the handle right by the knob where you can see that it's received this really, really intense pressure. And you think about the history that it's had, and I overlapped it with another secondary negative of the hands, and this was in a Victorian estate. It was kind of that parlor room where the caskets go. Um, and I played around with, what if I print one sandwiched on top of the other, or what if I print them both separately and expose them separately in the darkroom? So that became really interesting to not only the process geek part of me, but also the how it looks different and how we interpret it different based on just what we see of the way that the process involved. This is a negative, and this is the double exposure right on the negative on a 4x5, where I just dodged out one side and slightly moved it over and dodged out the other as I captured it. I didn't think this one had as much meaning to it, but I thought it was interesting as a technique that, you're still in that realm of the multiplicity. So I went forwards, all right, what is there to discover? And I've only been working in the darkroom at this point about 5 years, and liquid light came to the table, and you can still get liquid light. So this is liquid light painted onto a 24 by 24, or probably bigger with the edges, um, piece of arches, really, really thick, probably 300-pound paper. So it's gonna hold up to some processing. And I loved that part about the hand of the artist in this. So, you can see the brush strokes in it, and you can see the little bit of difference in the developing of this. And I was also playing around with the juxtaposition of this really, really formal shirt versus this. And this was just something I came across. I didn't set this up. So I played with, well, this is like this, only it's the opposite. And then kind of thinking about, well, they don't look the same. They don't really make a great diptych, but it is an interesting conversation about the samenesses and the differences between them. And I'll just share for a minute about this image too. I have never seen an image that printed that dark of a contrast range in liquid light, and I will tell you the secret what I did, but you should always tell me if this is something that you can make work for yourself. I printed this so dark that it was so overexposed that it was not recoverable. And I threw it in a tray of fixer, I think for a week in my bathtub. And, I had nothing to lose. This was a horribly overexposed image, and it washed out with this beautiful contrast. So I'm sharing the info there for you. Um, so still thinking about meaning, this is a medium format image, and I started to experiment with, well, what if I paint into it, like I had drawn onto Solicitor, or what if I paint where the image is gonna be and print over where the image is going to be? And I probably didn't last very long in this process, but it was interesting. And that is when I started in on more of an alternative process version with Van Dyke and platinum palladium, calotype. I think this was my first calotype, and also cyanotype. This one would be a Van Dyke print. And what I thought was interesting again was that minute between something happening. So this is about a 30-second exposure, but I have the flash hit it right at that in-between moment where my model is getting up and leaving and exiting the scene. And the interesting thing was that I couldn't exactly plan it. I didn't know what I was going to get. So I probably captured 30 or 40 of these just to see, because on your film, you don't know that fraction of a second, what it really looks like. So that said, I will say that as I'm growing as a photographer, I'm starting and still do. I'm not so committed to like, am I going to shoot this 35 millimeter? Am I going to shoot this on chrome? Is it going to be black and white? Am I going to shoot this on 4x5 or medium format or 8x10 or 5x7? A lot of times I will shoot something in all of the versions that I have at my disposal at that time. And then that way I get to choose. And sometimes I mix them up. And it just gives me a lot more versatility and flexibility. But, also to be said, that's like that indecisiveness about, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. So here's the handle again, and this became an entire body of work, and I'm rethinking about, what does this communicate and what does it say? And I'm fusing it with, at the bottom, you can see this path in the snow, and I'm sewing over these silk forms and layering it with other images. So this is printed on the back, printed on the front. This is 120 inches high and held with these paper covered weights on the top and bottom, and then sewn with the silk. And this was my first one. I didn't even know if this was going to work as a direction. The other side of this has ladders and the cords that extension cords wrap up into. I don't know if I have a picture of the back, but we'll keep going. So as I moved forwards with this, I'm liking the idea. I've got my larger images that are in a way like the main chapter headliners, and the smaller images become the support images of the larger. And I worked through, let me look at my list here. I worked through ideas of destiny, of obligation, of friendship, of loss, of despair. Let's look at some of these other ones. So we've got, of storytelling, of history, and of guilt. The bottom image here is a door that, and these are just like little tiny things, but all of them together, I'm hoping the impact of the viewer. The small images at the bottom of that are from the jail that Charles Manson was locked into. And the iron at the top of this, I named this one the weight. So it has to do with a little bit of obligation between commitment and the choice of not commitment. And you'll see this one again. For this, I was kind of disappointed to have to print these digitally because I had not discovered yet how to put on this thin of tissue a image that did not deteriorate the paper, which later I did discover, but then to hold the paper in the trays to still not crumble in front of me, I was limited in scale. So I will take this minute to give Susan K. Grant a nod about her Night Journeys images that if you haven't seen them yet, you need to see those either in person or online. And she does these beautiful images from sleep, her stories about sleep. So here's a couple more from this set. And I think a lot about mortality, friendships. I remember thinking about predestination with this one. And this had a little bit to do with storytelling. I have this typewriter from Hemingway's house at the bottom. The song, The Wait, actually inspired this image as well. So a couple more. Oh, here's the ladders on the back with the cords. And a lot of them have leaves on the back of them too. So I'm visiting about the image and what the subject, the object itself has to say to the viewer and how that communicates. But I think one of the things I like, instead of being more literal, because those felt a little literal, um, is how a camera reveals and conceals. So I really like that Schweinflug that happens when you tilt your lens and you can choose that area that's in focus and the other can fall out in front and it can fall out in back. And I'm fortunate enough to have had a museum give me an amazing lens that might be the next slide or it might be further down. But those of you that haven't played with this yet, I felt obligated to put this slide in. So you can tilt your lens and you can tilt your film plane until the two just intersect just right. So that narrow area of focus is so small and the areas that aren't in focus become circles of confusion. So here's a look at just the setup. This one's actually a lower front. And then a look at how I have this in focus and this in focus, but my fallout is severe. And also proximity to your object too. So the closer that you are, your less depth of field. So I'm working through that concept and that principle, and I'm also working through, here are these objects, and these objects are going to tell me this story, and this story is going to come together in front of me. But it takes a while. Like I set this typewriter up on my front porch, and it was probably there for a week. And in the meantime, no, a bird did not put a nest there, but I found a perfect hummingbird nest to put there. And I made that image and it was it was a one of thinking about, just the story that it's telling. And to me, and it might be different to you, to me, it was telling about the artist's search for figuring out what something is about. So I call it empty page because if the typewriter, this is the literal part, if the typewriter has no paper in it, you don't have the story yet, you're still trying to figure out the story. So the keys on this typewriter aren't the current version of where the keys are located. So I was hoping that that hid the literalness of the meaning a little bit, but I loved the tilt shift. And so I'm working with my 8x10 camera and I'm slicing the center out of my negative. And I didn't know I was at first. The first images I was getting so many of. And, by the time you develop your 8x10 film and you look at it and you've taken the pictures and you're leaving your setup, so because you don't know if you are going to be happy with it and revisit it, sometimes I revisit my capture for 5 times. And at that point, I'm saying, what? Am I a photographer? I am not a photographer if I can't get this picture. But yeah, working through it and coming up with that combination. So I came up with this diptych that was the combination of having an idea and not having an idea. And, light bulbs again are kind of literal, having an idea, and a typewriter with no paper in it, not having an idea. So empty page and working it out. Um, I went to a workshop with Margaret Lejeune that I am currently doing a collaborative project with right now, and we've been working on it for 5 years. But the workshop that I went to was so that you could spend some time conceptualizing what could be an idea. And the beauty of that workshop was she had us all write down 20 things, and I use this to this day in my classes. You write down 20 things that could be a cool idea. And then you look at your 20 things and you come up with, of those, which has content and which is just subject. So you're looking for, of those, the ones that have content, now circle it and then make a list of all the other things that have to do with it, and now draw what you think that looks like or could, or at least make a list of what would you need to have to take those pictures. Then go visit 3 other people in that room in that workshop and talk about your ideas. And I walked out of there with this in my head, maybe not drawn, but in my head. And I was able to assemble it with the help of, all the students that were in that class that day, and capture that image. And along the way, I'm looking for, okay, this feels like it needs to be a really tactile thing. So I'm working out the platinum palladium version of how I'm going to do this. And I have a light unit that'll do a 24-inch, or at that time would do a 24-inch image on the long side, probably 20 on the short. And, those of you that haven't done platinum palladium, it's expensive, but it's an amazingly beautiful process. And at this point, this was back when you get all the directions from, either formulary or from Bostic and Sullivan, and you count the drops. And you count how many drops of each of the formulas that you're going to put into it, and you mix it up and you put it on this. So you're arranging your chemistry, because your negative, they were still speaking to regular film negatives at that point, or ortholitho negatives. And so that wasn't controllable. You were stuck with that, and you would change your chemistry to adapt to your negative. And now we can adapt our curves on our transparencies to solid chemistry. So the chemistry doesn't change. So that's kind of nice. But this was when I was still counting all of the drops for that. So a little look at the light unit, transparency, the washout. This is not my washout. This is one of my friends. And then, all of the tests that have to happen in order to figure it out. And you can see my notes up here about counting like my light units, and yeah, that it's long. But thank you to Margaret for this startup idea. And where this went from this image as I continued it on, and it was an early version of my current project, where I would have people come over and we would invent what it is that the story is going to be that we're putting together. So for this particular person, they were thinking about again, similar to my earlier image, the weight of obligation, but also the risk of making yourself vulnerable too. And how many times can you make yourself vulnerable and not crash? This was a collaborative of 2 other people, and they just had direct associations to that this was a special object in their family. So this is introducing myself to thinking about historical objects and how they're holding that significance. Same with this group. This is 1, 2, 3, 3 people. This one was a pretty amazing one, and that's the one I had the transparency of. So I'm thinking about, how you're pushing and you're changing the balance of things, and like you're changing what should be. Sharing guilt, I think, was the story with this one. And I loved the refraction that happens in the image too. All right, now did I mess up let's see if I can still make it go forwards. All right, let's try that. There we go. All right, yay. Um, and hat in hand, it's a word and it's a phrase, but kind of putting it together, I hadn't seen it. So that was a nice collaborative project as well. So I'm working through these images and I'm thinking about, the associations with them and playing with all of these different processes that I enjoy working on. And I really like spending time with the images and thinking about the parts and pieces of how the image itself sees us. And it also makes me think about things like Roland Barthes' Camera Lucida, where he writes about am I going to get this right? The specter, the punctum, and the spectrum, I think it's going to be. Sorry. Looking. Oh, of course, I just highlighted it. Okay, I think I have it right. And one of the things that he talks about in his part about the winter garden is missing his mother. And he also talks about that the interesting occurrence of the thing that was the image, that the photographer saw the original and now you are seeing the image and the image is looking back at you, and that kind of passage of transference in that. So a lot of times when I'm in the darkroom, I'm thinking and I'm looking at the image and pondering the what saw this image and how do I see this now? Yeah, I don't know why I put that there. So a lot of these images, one of the things that happens is, as intimate and beautiful as they are small, like the collodion plates that I sent to the gallery, and how strong and confrontational they are when they're large. This work, I have never printed small. It's only been large. And one of the things about this story, so this is called Inculcated Domesticity. And it's probably angry work. And, we all have personal stories. And this, I guess, is going to be one of my angriest stories where, it's a particular point in my life where this is how I chose to work through that part of my life too. Um, but yeah, they become really confrontational when they're big and you're standing next to this huge iron or this huge beater. And these are combination of film images, scans of prints of images, scans of objects themselves into the computer, and then moving on to the big prints. So here's some close-ups of some of them. And it took me a while to find out what this piece even was, but it hooks up equipment together. It's a coupler. I like putting the hints of other things in with this too, and adding some darkroom solarization to it where, this is more than one because I never got one that was actually that good. I had to combine them. Some edges, some hints of parts and pieces along the way. And thinking about that slanted depth of field too. I did another set in the same vein, and probably the scissors are just as aggressive making paper dolls, which seems like a really child pastime to do, like a fun, it should be special, it should be um, kind of historic, marking your childhood. And with the scissors so aggressive, it just became like um, some of the talking heads with the wrench that kind of clamps down, those of you that know that music. So kind of aggressive. I started in a new project. I'd been given a toolbox, a machinist toolbox, and it belonged to my grandfather, Oakley Dobbins, step-grandfather. He's 95, and I didn't really know him, but we had inherited this project, this box from him. My parents passed it on, and I don't know if any of you have had old tools that, are really precision tools that you have to keep really low humidity and probably you have to visit them often and handle them and keep them happy as you're aging them. So I had this beautiful box and I felt a whole lot of obligation about these tools. It was like almost too much, still feels like too much to have these tools to take good care of them. But I spent an entire summer with the objects. And you'll see they're printed on aluminum here. So the summer was investigating each of the objects and arranging it and getting the things out of the drawer and coming up with the composition that spoke to the possible story that I might be getting, hopefully getting, maybe it's subliminally, maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with the story. And what I came up with at the end of the summer, besides that I really loved the 6 images that I had, is that I knew less than I started. I thought I was going to discover more about my step grandfather. And I found myself, asking questions like, why would these cardinal feathers be in his toolbox? Or, why would he have a marble in his toolbox? So, being mechanical things that, I'll go back to that slide where they're printed on metal, an interesting thing happened out of that is that because the grain of the metal was going horizontally, the ink on the sheets caused this kind of shift of light as you walk by them. So you almost had a little bit of a dimensionality to them. What I didn't love about them was, the product of the printing of that was out of my hands. So I didn't get to personally do that. But I still love the images so much. And when I had discovered photogravure, that Stephanie, I saw that you were working on some photogravure, so heads off to how fun that is. Um, it seemed like the really, really perfect way to do my next project. So, and sometimes I just like the paper that I'm using for underneath, and look at that. But I took a workshop with Clay Harmon, and he is amazing. Any of you get a chance to work with him. He is also doing a workshop at Photostock Fest in Michigan, a couple hours north of me this summer, which is full, but I would have taken it again. um, it was the perfect way to put together the images about my woodworker grandfather because it was more tactile, but it was warmer. It had more physicality to it. And I even liked the embossing of the edge of the paper as well, too. So I'm working through the images, looking at the light became a really important part. So this was in my father's barn where the light was coming in just through one window. So it was very directional. And it was about, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So coming through, and I only spent one day on photographing these versus the machinist images I spent the whole summer, but came up with an equation for them that was really, I probably took 200 pictures, but I came up with what I felt the essence of them would be. And, you can see working through that shallow depth of field. And I also tried this with my mother's lace making things, and she does all of her hand lace making, international styles. So she spent some time with me showing me all of the tools that she works with. And I was okay with these images. I didn't think I was as successful as the other 2 projects had been. And, maybe it's because the variety of the objects are so similar. Of all of them, this was probably my favorite one because of the directional lines that you could use following through it. Maybe this one equally. So these are all printed platinum palladium. So you get the idea. I love process. I will probably work process to death, and I'm moving forwards, when I discovered collodion wet plate, and that's how I met Del, was up on John Coffer's Dundee, New York, at his jamboree. But actually, my students, some of you know this that are here, my students all decided that because I have a big enough backyard and a big enough darkroom, that I should start the wet plate at my house, and we can all just come to my house and make wet plates. So I have a lot of stuff, and we're all working through it. So we're coming up with different glass and image plates, and um, a couple of variety of vendors. Nod to my husband, who helps us mix our chemistry when we're on our own to mix it. And then some looks at previous darkroom days. And I love this. Dolly, you're gonna love this too. This big sign in front of the silver nitrate tank to remind everybody, please be careful with this and don't be dripping it all over. So I'm hoping that many of you have done wet plate collodion processes before, but basically, if you haven't, you're using a big camera and you're putting a plate in the back of where the film would have gone if you were shooting film with your camera. So this is a couple at my house, and a couple look at, so the plate holder will go in the back here, just like a regular film holder, and you see your image upside down and backwards. This is my baby. Turns out when I bought this for grad school that the guy that makes this actually lives in the same city as I do. But today, to get one of these, because he's retired and moved to Texas and sold his design to Japan, to get an original one like this is a really big deal. And then this is the lens that I have been gifted, and it's pretty amazing too, to have a lens that will do that really, really shallow depth of field. And just a funny little part about it, when I first got it and some of my students came over to play with it with me, we couldn't focus it. I think that all of the glass in it had been reassembled backwards. So when we got one of the big floods here, the lens got wet and I had to take it apart, and I looked up the directions online of how to reassemble it. I think I put it together better than it had been, but I had to hammer out one of these rings was bent from someone dropping it, so I had to hammer that out. At the workshops, usually I try to take a couple images or so, which is really hard because it feels like I am always like, where's the this? Where's the that? I don't know, I need help, or, this broke, and, I have the students use a couple of the cameras I've got because not everybody has one. And they're not always 100% ready to go. So along the way, I've taken a couple that I've liked. And one particular year, I took this one right at the end of the workshop. And this sat on my desk for a year, and I kept going back to it and looking at it and thinking, is it something? Is it nothing? Kind of like the Johnny Carson, does it float or does it not float? Will it sink or will it float? And I decided, yeah, this could be something because, not only do I have this object, but it's telling a story, particularly about the person that's holding it and the wish for fertility or that motherhood kind of thing. And so, here it's checking all the markers. I have my subject, I've got my shallow depth of field, I've got an object, this could work. So I had my daughter come back, and here, let's play you a couple of these fun ones. So this is looking at the image right after you've developed it. And you can see the inversion of the positive to the negative. And let's see if we can get out. And then this is fixing it, which is probably my favorite part. When the image goes in and you get to see what you've got. And yeah, I wish my fixer tank was cleaner. I'm getting a new one. So let's see. Oh, yeah. So I must be talking about it. Okay. And so we don't have to play the whole thing. How am I doing on time? I have no idea what time it is. I'm looking.
It's
I-
about just about 12 minutes to 8.
Okay, all right. So we'll move through quickly. We're not going to spend time on this video. All right, so moving through the images, some of the workshops, finishing up. All right, so the problem with that project is that it's seasonal. And if I am going to take images, of people holding objects and I'm doing wet plate collodion, and you need UV to do that, so I pulled my resources of everything in my studio, and I was able to come up with a strobe that can expose a plate in one pop, not two, because previously I had two. And this is 96,000 watts of light hitting my person all at one time. So I warned them and have them close their eyes. But it made it seem like this is a project that's possible to do well, my other project isn't working. I was trying to do a project about dreams, and I had 4 of them that were working and the rest not. So here we go. I'm working with a daughter, and we're coming up with here can be the story of your childhood experiences. And at this particular point in her life, she didn't have, and I hope I don't ruin the images by telling you what the associations with them were, because sometimes it's just so much nicer to have your own associations with them. But she was really, really fearful about having her own place at this time. This was my grandmother's fan. So we're working through that, and we're working through what am I going to do for presentation of this? So I tried printing a few. I tried, a few versions of different duplicate plates. I put together this exhibit on Kozo, so they're all printed on Kozo and hanging on a second layer of Gampi with bamboo. And, that was okay. It didn't quite feel like it. And then I thought, well, what happens if you put it in the enlarger? So if I make a tri-X negative of my images from my scan, and I put my negative, or actually I need it to be a positive, so my positive in the enlarger and project it onto my plate, what can I do? And I will say this is before I got better at my chemistry, so there's a lot of crap on this negative, but I was looking more at what does the exposure look like? Can I even get an exposure from an enlarger? And at f4.5 on my lens, I think it was a 120 lens with a 4x5 negative, I was at 2 minutes that I could do this. And my plate isn't drying, because usually I let my plate dry a little bit first before I'm putting it in my film holder anyhow. So moving forwards, fast forwards on time, I've explored a couple different ways to exhibit this, and one has been resin coating the image. And it was not the perfect solution, but it was the closest at the time that I got to the sameness as the feel of a varnished plate, because you have that high gloss look, but there is not that authenticity of the feel of them as a resin piece. It's like a duplication. And, Walter Benjamin talks about the aura of the original and the duplicate, and I felt like this is more like a duplicate. So I'm speeding through just a word about each one. So this is mourning a lost horse. This one was telling a child about mortality. This was a story about her father and some of the shared time experiences. A relationship with this guitar, 25-year-old relationship. This one had one word, change. Sharing historical hereditary items that had been passed down in the family. Same with this one. This was a board, what did she call it? A Zoom board? Let's see if I got it. All right, I'm hurrying. I don't want to take up your time. Vision board, she called it. I don't know if you guys have vision boards. I did not have a vision board, but this seemed like a really good thing. This was a nod to inspiring her creativity. And each person writes about their story to me. If it's a page or if it's 3 words, I have them all write about it. So the story about who gave them the basket or who gave them the mirror or, the life of the brooch and how they got it. This had been passed down in the family. So oftentimes the objects are ones that have been generationally passed down. This one was kind of different because this crossed over my dream series to my object series, and she had a dream about losing all her teeth. This was care. And I have beautiful stories about all of these. My intentions are that they go in a book. This is the one that you saw in the video being processed, that they go in a book with a translucent page with their story, and the next page is their image. And then that way, I feel like the images are just about as powerful as telling the story, and that some people can choose to not read it, and some people really want to read the story. This was made by her husband when her husband was a child. The story of the red doll. And this artist is writing a book about this. So the funny thing that happened, and this is near the end of my slides, is that I realized that all along I had the story. Has it ever happened to you when all along you really has kind of like the Wizard of Oz and Dorothy, all the time she really knew how to get there. This is an image I took with Mark Osterman at the Eastman House years before I started my project. And now I'm coming back to, oh my God, I have this plate. And oh my God, it's really fitting for the set. If I was to include it, it would have to be number 00 or 0 or something. So here's getting ready for the show for you guys. And here's one of the images in the show. And I hope you guys can all come to Philadelphia to see it. And that's me.
Thanks, Rebecca. I can't wait to see them in person. I can't wait to see the whole show.
I can't wait either. Oh my gosh.
Well, thanks for sharing everything. It was interesting to see all the bodies of work, stuff I was not familiar with before, and like the progression and like you were saying, the process, like how much you love process, like seeing your forays into different processes.
Thank you. Yeah. It I didn't realize I was doing that until you go to put it all together and then look back like, oh my God, I was thinking about that then.
Um,
Let's see.
yeah, if anybody has questions or comments too, because I can save the chat, I'll get a transcript of it. And so I can share that transcript with Rebecca. So if you have anything you want to put in the chat, question or a comment or something that you would like
I see
shared
a
with her.
question. There's a good
Oh,
one. Let's see if we've got any others. Okay, so here's one I can answer. So what got me started in photography? Actually, I was not going to do photography. I'd learned about predestination in early college, and I thought, oh my God, and my name is Zeiss. There is no way that, it's almost like your parents tell you you have to do this. So no, you are not going to do that. Well, if my name is Zeiss, I am not going to be a photographer. So I'm going to be a painting and drawing artist. But then I had to learn photography in order to record my paintings and my drawings. And all of a sudden, it just snowballed.
predestiny.
Yeah.
Couldn't stay
Yeah.
away.
Uh,
Um, Vanessa likes how the processes inform your work, and we hope that you could make it to the show as well. Vanessa opening June 2nd from 2 to 5 p.m. So come up from Jersey. And
no.
also Dulce says your work is very beautiful and inspiring.
Oh, well, thank you, Dulce.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? We got
Questions,
a minute.
comments? Yeah, and like I just said, if you can make it, if you can't make it to the opening, but you're in the area or you're going to be in Philly or in the area sometime between when it opens on June 2nd through Sunday, July 14th, which is when the show comes down, just get in touch via the website and you can make an appointment to come see the show in person if you can't make it to the opening, but we hope that we see as many of you as possible at the opening. Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can't wait to see the installation, all of the work together. I think will look amazing. And then you have so many different kind of presentation methods and installation methods. That was also really interesting to see the different types of paper and the different scale, and really thinking about how to present each body of work unique to that body of work.
Yeah, wouldn't it be so much easier if you always did stuff the same? Yeah, fine. Yeah, that doesn't make it easy, but it does make it um particular to that. Like you're finding the right thing for it. Almost like the right
Yeah.
container.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's
uh,
inspirational.
thank you.
All right. Well,
Thank you
thanks.
everyone for coming.
Nice to spend a Monday evening with everyone, and obviously including you too, Rebecca. And so thank you for coming and sharing your work and for being part of the show.
I'm excited. Thank
Yeah,
you.
me too. So thanks everybody for coming, and we hope to see you either in the space for the opening or online at our next talk or somewhere in between.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
See you.